So last night, I watched the PBS special Frontline documentary, and the title was Trump's American Carnage. And even though Frontline can be very liberal, one-sided a little bit, but they had a few moments where they actually they balance themselves out a little bit, where they'll have a few representatives from the Democrats, a few representatives on the Republican, and they also will have journalism on both sides on how they felt about certain things. But one thing I noticed about these protests is that on the conservative side, I feel that people who protest on the conservative side, majority of the mid-American Caucasian folks in this society feel that they are losing their rights and they're slowly but surely slipping away out of their fingertips. They are losing the American dream, and they've been left out of the will of this society. And Donald Trump was their last hope. Now, when it comes to the so-called quote-unquote liberal side, you actually can do some serious research on why they protest. Even back then, liberals jumped on the bandwagon of the civil rights movement, whether it's dealing with women's rights, equality, right voting acts, and also dealing with LGBTQ situations like in the Roaring '70s. And now you have the so-called Black Lives Matter movement that deals with all of those things now. So just to try to be fair, it seems to me that the liberals protest just to be protesting. A lot of these protests they're doing today, it really has nothing to do with them. They act like they care about somebody's rights. In reality, they're just doing it. They're just doing it just to be doing it. That's what it comes across to me. So when I was watching that thing last night, when I was watching it, the more I watched it, the more I actually understand why people protest. And I started to really understand why black folks really need to start concentrating on their personal lives than worrying about getting out there with these people out here doing ruckus shit. Because the bottom line is simple. White folks on both sides have the same thing in common. Their hatred towards the government. Conservatives, to me, have a legitimate reason because they feel like their rights are being taken away from them. Far as guns rights, even though it hasn't been taken, but it's every year you hear about it, it's always being threatened. You get censored on major social media networks, and then when you talk about the far left, far as the liberals, it's a bunch of young people who want to latch on to so-called Black Lives Matter movement for the shooting and killing of so-called unarmed black men by police, and they jump on these marches and these speeches, and they come in and they create havoc. And then when someone finally stops one of them and asks him, "What are you passionate about and what are you doing this for?" the first thing they say is, "We're passionate about immigration. We're passionate about racism. We're passionate about defunding the police. As you can see in this picture here, none of these people look oppressed. They don't. None of them look oppressed at all. Once again, I do not condone anything that happened in Capitol Hill, nor I condone anything that happens on these streets and cities where so-called unarmed black men were killed or shot by police officers. But I'm just wanting to break these things down, because what are you protesting for? What are you angry about? And then what kills me is one side, which is when you're dealing with these protests, they're always saying someone is racist. One side says one is racist, calling them white supremacists, calling them white nationalists, calling them all kinds of names. But no one has a name for so-called Antifas. What do you think they're doing? When they're burning down cities, if you actually look at reports, there's reports of injuries all over the world at these protests. You got sexual assaults that go on. And yes, on Twitter, you can literally see there's some guys literally receiving fellatio from marchers. You have marchers performing fellatio on protesters with their so-called Black Lives Matter symbol on their forehead and shirts. So I had to talk about this because I put this picture with this situation as far as the documentary, because I just want to know, as a heterosexual black male, what are you protesting for? You're not protesting for me, because it really doesn't do anything. Majority of white people on the liberal side protest. They only protest because they have hatred for the government, and the Black Lives Matter movement is the perfect latch on for them to express how they really feel. Even though in their everyday daily lives, it does not affect them at all. Now I can see on the conservative side why they would do that, like I said earlier. They felt like Donald Trump was their answer. Those 75 million folks who voted for him, that 18% of blacks who voted for him, and those three-dimensional thinking-minded people who actually will say, I kind of like what Donald Trump's done, there's millions of those out there. Those are the ones who didn't vote, but they understood what the process was. You can understand why they like Donald Trump. And then when he was taken out of office, to me, it feels like less than 4 years, because they tried to impeach him. They shortened his stay in the office. And now you bring in Biden, who really does not know what he's doing. He fumbles in every word that he speaks. He literally sit up there and say, what am I signing? And they tell him it doesn't matter. Just sign it. So those types of people who stands behind Donald Trump, those are the ones who are going to speak the loudest more than ever. On the liberal side, they just do the same thing over and over and over. They talk about the same thing. But the only ones that doesn't have any issues with the government is black folks. But yet and still the government doesn't do nothing for them. Like I said, unless they're in lower income houses where they're being watched and monitored by the police that were brought in from the government. And then when Tyrone wants to break bad against the police officers and get shot down in the street, that's where guys like this you see on this picture come in. Some white guy who is sitting in his mom's basement because he didn't feel like going to college, who's mad at the world, playing video games, smoking weed. Girlfriend broke up with him. Now she's messing with Tyrone. He doesn't have anything to do. So some of his buddies say, hey man, we're going to go to town so and such and such. Some black guy got shot and killed. But let's put some mask on and let's go down there. All right, cool. So what are you fighting for? All these folks who are on the liberal side, they claim they hate the government, but yet and still they searching for protection. You got a lot of these Birkenstock white girls who want to protest every time they turn around, but in reality they use the Black Lives Matter movement to push feminism and globalist and racial ideology. And you got these white boys who join in. They want to push anarchy. And you got black folks who just want white folks to just join them in solidarity. So it makes you wonder, what all does this mean? You know? Violence is up violence is up in 57 cities by 30% ever since the situation that happened to George Floyd in I think it was in Minnesota. So you are going to see more of these things right here, and you are going to see more conservatives who feel like they have been X'd out of the will of the American dream by the rich elite Republicans, because that's where the real divide is going to be, on the Republican side. The mid-American white folks and the elite Republicans. So those are going to be some clashes that you guys are going to start seeing in the near future. And yes, you are going to see, doesn't matter who's president, you are going to see more and more liberals take to the streets and try to push anarchy towards this society. More is to come. I promise you that.